It's that magical time again, where finance departments across the country gear up for their favorite season, budget season. For some, these are the most magical 4 months of the entire year. For the lucky ones, the season seems to last an eternity. The glow of the budget season can be felt in the air across the entire organization as finance professionals' once cheery dispositions slowly change and the bags under their eyes grow greater and greater with each passing month. At night, these professionals dream of perfectly consolidated income statements and boardroom approvals, only to find that after 4 months of slaving away, the budget's outdated the day it's approved.
I'm sure a lot of you can relate to Melissa's story and saga of the budgeting process. And today we're going to share with you the story between rolling forecasts and budgets, and hopefully get you to all move your organizations to rolling forecasts. And if you're already doing it, maybe we can share with you some new concepts in rolling forecasts. The first step is to look at the difference between budgets and plans. So a budget is typically the detail how you think the future should look. So we sit down, we try and plan out what we're going to do for next year. And it's very rigid. It doesn't get updated. It gets approved once annually, and that's the budget. Versus a forecast describes what the future most likely will look like. And what that is, it's being updated with actuals, either quarterly or maybe monthly, but the idea here is that we hopefully are evolving the numbers as things change in our marketplace. So let's look at why the budgeting process fails. And the first reason is that typically those budgets are outdated, we approve it, and boom, something happens. Suddenly we close a big account, and within a few days the budget is outdated, but it was finalized, so we can't really change those numbers. The second reason is that budgeting fosters a use it or lose it mentality in the organization. So you were given X number of dollars for your department to spend, and come the end of the year, you haven't needed to spend all of it. So suddenly you run out, you call all your vendors, and you try and use up your funds. Because if you don't use them, you lose them. And they don't reappear in next year's budget. The funds don't roll over. So this can pose a problem for the organization in that people aren't necessarily making decisions for the best interest of the organization. Typically, budgets are very rigid, so strategically they don't help the organization accomplish their goals. What you'll find is people are compensated oftentimes on the budget. So how did you perform to the budget? And big changes could happen in your industry and drastically affect your performance, either for the better or for the worse, but you're still focused on those numbers that were in the budget. The next concept is that it makes people focus on the numbers and not the results. So for example, if we were to look at your competitive advantage in your industry, think about why your clients buy from you. And maybe it's that you have 100% guarantee on your product, and you're like Zappos, you'll send them out right away, no questions asked return, and that's why people do business with you. And so you want to track that return rate and that client satisfaction rate, but typically we don't see that in a budget. So you want to start looking at results that lead you to be the industry leader as opposed to just the numbers. Budgets are oftentimes disconnected. So we could have a budget for our marketing department and a separate budget for our sales department, and maybe a separate for our inventory or production schedules. And what we find is if they're disconnected in nature, then a major change in one area, maybe even at the last minute in budget approval, doesn't affect the sales, for example. So if we get last minute funding to do a big campaign in Q4 for marketing, it should impact the sales, but because they're oftentimes disconnected, they don't show proper results to the organization. The numbers are typically focused on monthly numbers or annual numbers, and not a rolling number. And so a lot of times our projects or our initiatives to grow our business may be something that will take 18 or 24 months to accomplish, but the budget doesn't take that into consideration oftentimes. Budgets are a haven for either sandbaggers or optimists, and either one of these is bad news for the company. So a sandbagger would be a salesperson, for example, that says that they can only do 1.2 million when they really think they're going to do 2.4, but they want to look good and they want to get the maximum bonus or commission that they can. And that affects the company because suddenly they do the 2.4 million, and as a result, you don't have the bandwidth to service that business. Optimists, on the other hand, are the complete optimists. They're the ones saying, oh yeah, I can do 2.4, and really they do like 1 million. And as a result, you've planned ahead for resources and inventory and so forth for that higher number. So you really need to have accuracy. But unfortunately, the budget process and the fact that people are bonused oftentimes based on budgets can negatively impact the organization. So software will not fix these problems, by the way. As a whole, they are cultural problems, meaning we need to get the executives in the organization to say, it's time to fix this. We need to increase our accuracy of our forecasts, and we need to abandon the budgeting process altogether. I dream of a world where we're all just in a continuous forecasting process. So let's look at what people that are really good at forecasting, what do they understand? So the first item we have here is that time rolls on. So it's not just a month or a quarter or a year, but a lot of times it's a process that goes over many periods. But we want to constantly update it with actuals from the period that just occurred, as opposed to an annual process. So that time period may vary based on what industry you're in. So in some industry that is fast-paced, maybe even every month isn't often enough. Maybe you need to get down to the weekly level of your forecast, and we do have clients that do that. The next thing that people that really understand the benefits of forecasting know is that they create action items. So they look at and they monitor things that are actionable, things that I can do something about. If it's something that I can't do anything about, why am I even measuring it? I don't have control over it. So that's very important, and that information should also ultimately feed to your dashboards. They understand that they need to have participation from contributors, end users, people out in the field that are actively living these numbers. So they need to be able to collect that data very quickly and have that aggregate in real time and not have to do a lot of manual processes around that. If your forecast stays in an ivory tower, more than likely it is not that accurate. They understand the need for streamlined processes. So in order to get monthly or even weekly figures from people in the field, they need to have effective, efficient processes that can be automated. They also know that they need to have alignment and coordination. So you need to know that when you change the marketing forecast, it should impact the sales forecast, and that could impact the workforce planning model. So they're all connected. They know that we need to mitigate uncertainty and risk. So we need accuracy in the numbers. And this comes from giving better tools and also rewarding people for the accuracy of the numbers and discouraging sandbagging and optimists. They also get that these processes are driven by culture, and culture comes from the top. So if currently your executives are not on board with rolling forecasts and creating measurable items to forecast, then it's up to you to help educate them in this and the benefits of this. There's a great study, a CFO study by IBM that you can find on the internet that shares some insight on how much the value of organizations that follow this increase. The next thing we're going to look at is rolling forecast is like your weather forecast, right? You don't see it where the weatherman gets on the news and says, this month, here's the weather forecast. Or in December, they don't say, 2015 is going to have this weather. You just don't see that. They give you 5 days out typically, and they look forward, and they give us fact base based on the information that they have. And they say that, here's the probability of rain. So they're really educating us on what possibly could happen. But it's constantly being updated, even every hour, with new information. And that's how you want to look at your rolling forecast. So there are really several success factors. There's the time horizon, participation, modeling, risk and uncertainty, process measurement, and culture. And we're going to go through each one of these. So the first one, time horizon. What is a rolling forecast? Well, we know that there's budgeting, which is annual. We do it, we close it, we get it approved. And then in traditional forecasting, we typically will see that they do a reforecast every quarter. So Q1 forecast, Q2 forecast. A rolling forecast means that every month those numbers are getting updated with actuals, and they move out. So it's not just I have 12 months and January comes around and I upload the actuals, but I then move it out another month out to January of the next year and keep that a rolling forecast. Now, rolling forecast, does that equal 12 months quarterly or not? It really depends. So it depends on your business, your industry. When we look at a number of industries, we'll see that certain industries have short cycles and certain industries have longer cycles. So plant construction, investment, infrastructure, research and development type functions have long planning cycles, right? Sometimes, if you're building a Navy destroyer, that could go out probably 20 some years in its planning cycle. Other areas have much shorter cycles. So consumer electronics, retail, investment banking is very, very fast, right? So as a result, what we see is that typically affects their time horizon that they look at. For example, chemical companies might have a rolling 2 quarters on a monthly basis. Automotive have rolling 2 quarters on a quarterly basis. So it really kind of depends on the industry. This is some information that's been based on certain research that are typical for these industries. But think about what's most effective for you. The next factor is participation. And this means high participation. You got to get the people in the field that know this information actively involved. That's sales, that's marketing, that's HR, that's, inventory control, all of them. And we can do that with a workflow mechanism to say, where are we in this cycle? Who's actually submitted their information? And we can connect the various plans like marketing to sales and have them connect. So you really want to get a lot of people involved. And remember, if people are involved, then it will drive ownership and insight. So when they own the numbers, and it's not, hey, here's your numbers and mandated by the ivory tower, but they actually enter them in, they're more likely to succeed in them. The next factor is modeling. So remember the traditional template. We have our rows and columns, and we have our actuals for certain months, and then we go forecast and moving forward, right? And it's very much based on general ledger accounts. So what we want to look at that is this kind of breeds, it's like rabbits. Like if you start with an Excel spreadsheet, they start to multiply, right? And you got versions of that. It creates great risks. And it doesn't let you identify opportunities or customers or even those risks in your industry. So what we want to do is we want to simplify this process. So as Da Vinci said, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. You want to look at the materiality of the item that you're tracking and its volatility. So if it's highly volatile, like maybe exchange rates or something like that, and it's highly material in your bottom line, then you want to forecast that. If it's low materiality and low volatility, then you might want to just monitor that information. We also want to look at changing the language, and this is big for me. So everybody has these budgets. They're based on general ledger accounts, and most department heads don't know accounting, and they don't want to know accounting, and they dread it. what you want to do is change it up. Start using driver based. So instead of saying, what's your revenue going to be? Say, how many new opportunities are you going to have? How many items in the pipeline? What are your number of employees? Give me your customer satisfaction rating. Those are numbers that they can understand, that they know, and that can be calculated out to numbers. So for example, opportunities in our pipeline, if we start with 50 opportunities, and each one of those averages $20,000, then we have $1 million in our pipeline. If our conversion rate to hitting a home run on those is 20% of those opportunities gets closed, we can forecast our revenue to be $200,000. But we're asking the salespeople for opportunities and pipeline, and then we're calculating our conversion rate or giving them an assumption on that. So the idea is that to plan this out, you want to start small and grow big. So address your initial needs, and we can automate that as much as possible, like bringing actuals in. Then you want to look at the best practices, what should be our measures, and then extend that to the enterprise-wide. And later on, we can actually extend this even further to predictive analytics, including statistical analysis, where we take what our forecast is, we throw it into a solution set like Cognostatistics that then throws advanced algorithms on it and increases the accuracy of our forecast planning and passing that back to our planning system. The next factor we're going to talk about is risks and uncertainty. So with forecasting, you typically want to have multiple scenarios. So we want the ability to do a lot of what-ifing and adjust our assumptions, adjust data volumes. And so what happens is we look at it and we go, what if, there's a deep recession, there's a modest recovery, which way are we going to go? And then we try and calculate where we're going to be for our forecast. And that could adjust in some industries, that can adjust wildly within a quarter even. Consider a much simpler approach. So instead, why don't you consider looking at asking people for their upside and their downside? So as a result, you'll be able to measure and be able to say, okay, not only do I see what our budget, right, our old budget process, because some of you will never get rid of it despite my efforts, compared to what our current forecast is and our upside and our downside. And then we can measure our variance between those, like how much risk are we absorbing as a company. The next factor we're going to talk about is process measurement. So you want to make sure when you're creating these, the measures you should consider include the forecast accuracy. Okay, we want to get rid of those sandbaggers. The cycle and time it takes to complete this, and how confident are you in the numbers. And I believe in rewarding people that are right on the numbers in their forecast, because it's a domino effect, and then other people will strive to get more accuracy. So our goal is to aim for a repeatable, measurable quality and set those goals and what we want to accomplish. We want to be able to also take this forecast accuracy and actually look at it. So by leveraging some of the tools of Cognos BI, what we can do is we can actually start to say, okay, what percentage variance were you out of range for our forecast? And we can even traffic light this and show of these, these months were in above our targets, below it, and in an acceptable range. And finally, maybe one of the most important things to your success is culture. So when we have the forecast key role in the management of the company means it must be brutally honest, whether we like it or not. So we really have to understand and hold people accountable for their numbers. I really think this impacts a lot of places like sales. We've been holding them accountable for a number of years, but what about marketing? What if we look at the marketing plans, how many people really hold marketing departments accountable? Well, now that we have some tools like predictive analytics, we can start to do a much better job of having accuracy in how many new opportunities a marketing plan will develop. So maybe that's how you should measure them. And when the forecast is substantially lower than the actuals, then we need to ask them, why are they holding back? Why are we not accurate in these numbers? Now, understand management always sets the tones in this. So historically, what would happen is they go, why didn't we anticipate that in the budget? Who screwed up? Like that whole blame game. And we want to get people out of the blame game, and we want to move them into a really team approach, right? And move them into say, okay, clearly things have changed. What drivers change? What impact to the business? And what actions should we be taking? So you can catch that every month and realign resources and realign the teams so that you can take advantage of both opportunities and protect yourself from threats of the business environment. So management owns, clarifies, and clarifies the purpose of the rolling forecast. So this is really important that this comes from a high level to say, here's why we're doing it, here's how we're doing it, and they can help tie the relationship to decision making in relationship to the budget. They can look at this information and maybe create some new compensation approaches, but it's got to be, the message has to come from the top, and not just from finance, but all areas of the organization have to understand the value of this and how it's going to help the organization succeed in a rapidly changing environment. So those are our success factors. We talked about time, participation, modeling, uncertainty and risk, process measurement, and most importantly, culture. So my challenge to you is to first off define your approach. Okay. Forecast culture is required. Again, if you work for an organization and it's not the philosophy to be in a forecast environment and they love their budget, I really recommend that you start to educate them and maybe do a little lunch and learn. And there's some great stats out there. IBM has some great CFO studies that can show you the benefits of rolling forecasts, and you can use concrete evidence and information and studies and surveys that will help change the concept and prove that this is a good use of funds and a good movement for the organization. Always there's going to be changes in your models, so anticipate those and give yourself the flexibility of being able to acquire a competitor and move that into your models really easily. In order to do this and to make it effective, you may need to upgrade your technology. So many of you are probably IBM Cognos users of TM1. If you're not, we'd love to explore that with you. But make sure that you understand that you may need to upgrade to be able to have the efficiencies you need to move yourself to a forecast environment. So I hope you found our session on rolling forecasts informative. If you'd like to reach out to me directly, I can be reached at hcole@lodestarsolutions.com. I encourage you to check out our YouTube channel where we will post this session as well as many more. And you can find it under our Lodestar Solution area of the YouTube channel. Also, I am on Twitter. If you want to get on my personal Twitter, it's at HeatherEyes. And we do have a Lodestar Twitter that we tweet a lot at Lodestar_SOL. So hopefully you will join us for all our other videos. Thanks for joining us.